Okay, good evening, everybody. We are on to the second OEQ. It's a multi-part OEQ on smart cities. The first one really was about different inputs from backgrounds of in the architecture, town planning space, financial planning, and technology consulting, etc. And not all things could be solved by technology. There were a lot of other aspects of it that we discussed. But in this particular OUQ, what we are attempting to do really is focus a little more on technology and specifically on the impact that the India stack could have on the smart cities framework. And so let me start by giving a quick synopsis of this whole smart cities initiative, and then throw it open to our as questions. So from a smart cities perspective, what all of us have is the need for cities to be safe, to be clean, to be vibrant, and then with essentially for all of us to be happy to live in a city and a sense of pride associated with it. But what we see is, of course, a lot of frustration that builds up, and the city, quote unquote, is not smart enough for us to live in it or conduct business in it, and so on and so forth. The government actually initiated the whole Digital India campaign, and if one were to take the connotation to the government as digital government, the key tenets of that really is how to improve the transparency and accountability of a government, how to build and promote trust between the government and its various stakeholders that have elected it, and then the citizen engagement and empowerment aspects of it, and of course the operational efficiency of a government, because it makes essentially the tax dollars of ours to work in a much better fashion. And then a lot of the decision making ought to be based on facts, the way that traditionally organizations are run, and to promote, of course, economic development for everybody overall. A lot of the smart city discussions have been focused on the things like smart lighting, transport, and various other things, which are silos or departmental solutions to improve efficiency. But what we thought is that let's discuss a little more about two broad aspects of it, of how can we look at the approach towards smart cities in a more, I would say, interesting manner, given the public goods that are available to us. And then the second is actually try and go through some examples for different stratas of society in terms of what they would see as what a smart city would do for them. Now, a lot of the smart cities, digital India, digital governments work on data. And there's a lot of initiatives by various cities and governments around the world of open data, and opendata.gov, and San Francisco has opened up its data, and so on and so forth. The key for open data is really in terms of transparency and engagement, creating a collaborative and innovation framework for participation, and of course to increase efficiency. But the problem in today's cities in India and is really that there's a lot of gatekeepers to this data. Gatekeepers tend to then use that power to make money. It's fragmented across multiple silos within the government, And then there's a lot of asymmetry of that data between the citizens and other stakeholders. And because of that asymmetry, not everybody gets benefited from that. So we have two distinguished panelists. One is Pramod, the other is Sanjay, who have actually worked for many years in the public goods that India now has built and is referred to as India Stack. Broadly, it's a paperless, presence-less, cashless environment which gives, with consent, opens up a lot of opportunities. So what we wanted to discuss today is the relevance and the experience that we have with India Stack in terms of how that could be, and the learnings that we have to actually build smart cities frameworks and run government as a service, or the government as a platform. And the traditional approach has always been to tender out solutions, and there's some aspects associated with that which are severely constraining. So I'd like to ask Sanjay and Pramod to maybe talk a little bit about the experience that they have had in terms of working with the central government to transform their thought process from the traditional approach to open data platforms which are API-led with the India Stack, and then also maybe with in the financial tech with various agencies about how they should approach this whole thing as a marketplace which enables the innovation framework to happen rather than locking it to certain specific vendors. So Sanjay, Pramod, any thoughts in terms of the learnings associated with India Stack in terms of opening up platforms as a service or APIs, in terms of what should be the approach that state governments, city governments, and municipalities should have for approaching this rather than the traditional way?
So let me go first. Thanks, Ranga. If you note that over the last few years, the government has this open data initiative, and I think Pramod had a big part to play in that as well. But the idea is that since a lot of data is now available logically through RTI, etc., it actually makes sense for the government to think about this data up front, put it up in a way, and publish it. And this then allows other people to build on top of that data and try and build mashups. So opendata.gov.in already has different data sets that come in from different stakeholders, whether it's from India Post or from the UIDI and a few other places. That the Ministry of Statistics, all of this data is now available out there. And it makes sense for when you're planning a new city or any other such initiative to think of what data that is within this particular agency's approach, within their control, that they can make available to others to use. So for instance, if you are looking at traffic, you could think of making the traffic data available through an open API. Or if you're looking at certain other aspect of the city, or power, you name it, everything has data in it, and all of that data can be made available, which will then allow people outside the system, entrepreneurs, local activists, to start to use the data to provide visibility into the government process, and maybe even across systems to bridge the data to get particular results. Pramod, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, I was muted, sorry. Thanks, Sanjay. Thanks, Ranga. I think many experience, many learnings we have had since 2009 when we joined Aadhaar project at that time. And when we look back, most of that learning is actually applicable in any large government project, including smart city. Actually, smart city is peculiarly complex because of no particular definition, right? You could if you put Wi-Fi, it's called smart cities or whatever. I mean, it's just a very loosely used term, so which makes it even more messier for government because it's not well understood. So a couple of things I want to talk about. One, other than the data, so opening up the data, as Sanjay said, is essential for any transparency, and government departments should proactively ask this question themselves. If someone can get the data through RTI, why would I not publish that upfront? Why should people be going through RTI at all if the data can be made available? That is one question. It's a hard question. It's not easy at all because people think data is power, and so it's not straightforward to get it out. But I think RTI gave us the first step, and opendata.gov is giving us the sort of next step for us to do. But even more importantly, I think you asked, I wanted to talk a little bit about the procurement aspect. I think you touched upon that. So when we look back, we can only share what we did for Aadhaar. I think it's very, very useful. First of all, Nandan keeps saying this, you can't outsource thinking. So if government outsources through an RFP, even the thinking part, it's a disaster waiting to happen. So because it just be taken over. So you need to, first of all, build collaboration, build a small team that is internal, who is ready to collaborate with various industry bodies, people who are influential, people who are affected, ecosystem as a whole, and government provides something called expression of interest, which is an interesting model. EOI is very much usable in the government parlor to actually get feedback and design ideas. So Aadhaar successfully, UIDAI guys successfully did multiple EOIs before we did any small RFP at all. So first of all, don't do RFP if you don't know what you're doing. Okay, so you should go and do an EOI, build a small team, do an expression of interest, which asks for how do we go about doing it. Second point is that once you have an idea, strip out everything that you don't need to do, and you can let the ecosystem do. So ecosystem thinking is the second aspect of anything complex, including smart city. If government thinks they are going to build a smart city, they're simply wrong, and they're not going to do it. It's going to be messy, large procurement deal. That's pretty much what's going to happen. So it's very important that we encourage that thinking, is that there are many ecosystem players in the system who can be incentivized to continue to run many parts of smart cities, whether it's networking, whether it is data-driven transparency, whether it is any other collaboration with the government. Everything can be ecosystem-driven. And Aadhaar is a classic example. Let me give you a concrete example. I think it's useful. Aadhaar, UIDAI team, we procured no laptops, procured no biometric devices. So Sanjay and I were there, Raj and other guys were there. We put out an expression of interest and understood what we need to do, created an ecosystem play, and UIDAI procured no machines at all, no hardware devices on the field. So entire field operation was done by entrepreneurs who were incentivized to participate, and they were getting their money only after an Aadhaar number is generated. So that's an example of an ecosystem play where UIDAI procured nothing but ensured security through digital trust from end to end. So software is given by UIDAI, device drivers were certified by us, and all the encryption, decryption, everything else was done by us. Entire stack was done by us, but no procurement. Very, very interesting model. And we said every time you get an Aadhaar number, you generate it, you get an enrollment, we'll pay you 40 rupees. So what happened is that because each entrepreneur went and spent 1 lakh, 1.5 lakh per laptop and kit, it was their incentive to get more people into Aadhaar system. It was more than us. They were running around and enrolling people because only when they enrolled, they got 40 rupee back, and they already did a Capex investment. So it was beautifully incentive alignment, and we said, if you generate more Aadhaar, you get more people to. That is why they came to your apartment, did camps, they did all that thing because we were not even pushing. They were actually doing it themselves. So we did many such things in Aadhaar that was ecosystem based. So one is expression of interest. Don't go out and put RFP. Put expression of interest. Do design properly. Don't outsource design. Get a core team to think through the system and keep it minimal and let ecosystem do everything. For this to happen, you need a tech play and you need technology standards, technology API. Sanjay, for example, built the entire biometric plug and play device infrastructure for Aadhaar, which allowed any device vendor to go to STQC, get it certified, and make it plug and play. Like the way printers were plug and play to a Microsoft operating system. Microsoft didn't build printers, somebody else built it. So we allowed such design constructs, but it required thinking, it required designing, and it required, minimalism as a principle and ecosystem as a principle. So minimalism is from the government, and ecosystem, incentive aligned ecosystem is from the government. If they can get these 2 points, chances are they'll get most of the things right.
So I think these points both from you, Sanjay and Pramod. I think the key to it is a mindset shift from the government from a procurement-led philosophy to this new thought process, and let the ecosystem actually come in, whether they be startups or whether they be large players. Create a level playing field and allow rules and regulations and of governance so that everybody has that ability to participate, as opposed to the current process which says, let me hire some top 5 consultants, then hire system integrators and large companies with a minimum net worth of so much, and then essentially eliminate any innovation capability that startups and other players in the ecosystem really bring.
No, I think it's very, very interesting to, it's not hard. Why I think it's not hard is that if you have the right leadership in the government, 2009, 7 years ago, 6.5 years ago, UIDI, driven from Delhi, policy was driven from Delhi, procurement was driven from Delhi, were perfectly understanding what we were saying. So it's about getting the right leadership. Of course, having Nandan helped, but get the right people to support. Very rarely they oppose. I think they don't think through. I think a lot of times they just don't have the internal capacity or capability to think through the whole design. So what do? They can't. They have to outsource it. I think that's what they do. Sanjay, sorry.
Yeah. No, so Pramod, my point was that there are 2-3 things that you must remember. When you're building a city, you're not building it for a few years. And if you can imagine today what the systems will be 50 years from now, you're fooling yourself.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's better to think through this model to say, we'll build APIs, we'll build interfaces for certain functionality that may themselves evolve over time, but the systems on both sides, the back end that the smart city implements, the front end apps or whatever it is that interacting, can then iterate separately on their own roadmap and grow. And so it's very important to think through this aspect that you're designing for a really long term. It's not you do it once and forget it, and then 5 years later you re-implement the whole thing. That just
I think that's perfectly said. I think sustainability of a model without government having to pour money is very, very key. Government contracts, Sanjay and I have gone through it. I'm still going through in Aadhaar. It's a nightmare. It is not flexible. It is very, very hard to do change requests, and you can never imagine everything that you want on day one. So I think the best is to not build or build minimum specs and standards and allow ecosystem to self-sustain. And because there is an incentive for them. An example, actually, Chairman R.S. Sharma reached out recently wanting iSpirit team to think through how can we allow anyone, like solar on your rooftop, model for Wi-Fi. He was asking, can anyone with a Wi-Fi router provide a public Wi-Fi service? I will buy the Capex. I am an individual entrepreneur. I will buy a Wi-Fi router, and can I charge? Yeah, ideally it should be done. I think why should telcos invest in Capex? Why can't young entrepreneurs and building owners, if you are in a building, Sanjay was saying, why can't the building owner extend the telco network using a standard plug and play? Of course, you define the spec, you define the security standards, you define everything and you do. But let ecosystem drive because there is natural incentive for many people to be able to set up Wi-Fi touch points and so on, and actually make a little bit of money out of it. There's nothing wrong in doing that instead of asking telco to pour down another 1 billion buying Wi-Fi, routers. Why should they buy at all? They should just provide the backhaul and let everybody else plug it in. And India Stack, why it's an interesting in conjunction with India Stack, is that India Stack now allows identity verification, very, very strong identity through Aadhaar, completely paperless contract. So you can actually get onto a Wi-Fi touch point, subscribe to a Wi-Fi plan for 2 hours, 5 hours, without just by saying I agree and still legally able to sign a contract, for example, and actually make payment through a unified payment interface. That's coming up with this instantly paid. So India Stack definitely provides the underlying identity paperless and cashless layer APIs or frameworks for reimagining any service for that matter. It could be telco services or anything, transportation services. Why can't anyone be able to drive a last mile from my house to the bus point? They should be able to just bring it in.
So if any of the government folks are listening to this OEQ, I think the aspect that we should really look at is that governments or cities or even municipalities are not very different from each other. Their priorities might vary, but essentially the core principles of it are how do we get the elected government to better serve the society. So if we look at it from that perspective, there could be an potential extension of a public goods of how a smart city, a smart village, a smart municipality could actually start evolving by leveraging some of these public goods and expanding upon it. The sharing of knowledge, best practices, lots of those things with shared economies is becoming the norm as we speak. So I think it's time for even departments within an entity like a government or a municipality should learn from each other. They're becoming more connected. And then, even within state, you could see the aspect of multiple governments across cities and states within a state, for example, working together, and then also doing it across in a pan-India perspective of really looking at it. Because I think the distributed, do-it-yourself, figure-it-out-for-yourself approach and getting locked in a tendering process into proprietary systems is the kind of direction that's currently happening. And I think at some point in time, I think it's our collective responsibility to go back and offer a framework of how the India Stack could actually be a backbone to actually a public goods for smart cities and smart municipalities. Because there's three broad areas. One is, of course, quote unquote an ERP that governments use to run them, themselves as an organization. And I think there are companies like, Sanjay was associated with it on the egovernments.org, which actually is doing some work in that space. And there's so that's more internal efficiency. Then there's a lot of it which is departmental efficiency of getting lighting, energy, water, utilities, and so on and so forth to be a lot more efficient. And then the third is how do we work in a collaborative manner between the stakeholders and the elected officials so that we can all do a better job, because it's after all our money. So the question today is that everybody says, hey, I paid my taxes, now it's up to you. And then the governments say, I don't have the money to do it. and then of course there's no transparency. And so there is this question that transparency is not directly proportional to the intent today of graft that is the bane of our society, because more transparency means more, you know, visibility into procurement systems and various other things. So that's why you see that battle that is happening between RTI requests and what's happening as a result of that. So it will be interesting, and that's something that technologists cannot solve, but it has to have political will, where you actually have the will to open up that data and be transparency, because only that is the minimum prerequisite for anything to become smart and have a collaborative shared environment for the ecosystem.
Yeah.
Sanjay, any thought?
I think one more, I think, interesting comment. I think one thing that we learned, at least for us, it was very clear, is that the more departments that have to come together to do a project, the less probability is going to succeed. Because there's too many forces at play and all in opposing direction, right? Yeah. So it's very, very hard to get. So I think we have to find a way that each department, transportation department, having an ability for them to be able to run pilots very actively with ecosystem, design a small system and plug it into a larger platform. Otherwise, what happens is traditionally, it's okay, let's all sit together and create the most comprehensive one big database and one big project, because typically when you think of RFP, that's what a natural tendency is, to actually put everything possible in the RFP, and nothing actually takes off. And a lot of system integrators also love it because they see the bigger the RFP, the better, right, for them. So it's sort of only people like us who just think saying that we don't like large projects. And we don't
networks.
Example is that we had Afghanistan delegation here a couple of months back, and they have been doing identity project, or wanting to do identity project, for the last 3 years, and they have what, 22 million or some small number, okay, in Afghanistan. But we finished 1 billion, right, in 5 years. And so they obviously wanting to know what the biggest point we will take away for that, they had 56 attributes, and it included health attribute, full four generations data from birth registry, then land records and education, and all these ministries, they would never come together to agree on anything. So they have not even started the project. So first thing we said is remove all the attributes. And it's very, very anti-traditional thinking. And second point I want to say, so minimalism and doing it within the department is key for success, and doing smaller projects that plug in through APIs and open data is the way you layer it, so that larger and larger systems can be built. Second point is a very traditional thinking in government, is that I have to have a trusted person who is delivering this service, if it's an assisted service. An example is, we were talking to Yashaswini, Karnataka's health, one of the health, like RSBY, national RSBY. Karnataka has a health insurance called Yashaswini. There are 250 rupees the individual pays. So it's not the government is paying everything. But for you to subscribe, you need to fill 6 pages of forms. And you can only go to one department somewhere in MS building in Karnataka and do this. And we were asked, India Stack is perfect for that, right? You know the identity of the person. It's digitally verified. You can pay electronically. That means a SIM card shop guy right outside could be selling the insurance. But system doesn't think that way. They think, oh, how can I have a lack of person who is not a government employee or someone who is... And our argument has been that trust has to be established digitally. Once end-to-end trust is established digitally, which is possible with India Stack, and you make the workflow completely digital, then anyone can deliver that service. Your friendly neighborhood can deliver that service as an assisted model. So designing for assisted, anyone can assist model for many government services is very, very key. Otherwise, no services are accessible. It's just painful.
Yeah, because I think the traditional thought process is that I should own it all in a vertically integrated model. And I think the perfect example was IRTC, that they had the website, till they opened up the API, the website was as good as one vendor implementation. Whereas the moment they opened an API, you had the choice to go to from a startup to a large company and make reservations, and still everybody benefited. IRTC benefited, various companies benefited, the citizens got benefited. So I think examples such as those, in terms of today, I think we all share in the frustration of paying a property tax through the portal in Bangalore. Most of them, it keeps crashing, and so the bane of today's implementations is a single window and not the open API approach, which is what really you're propagating, which says that make sure that you're not the only source of access to granting any of the services, and make sure that it's democratized so that anybody in the ecosystem can access.
But understandably, when we were there, we realized when you have to be inside the system to realize this, is that look at who has bid for the income tax, what you call property tax in BBMP, must be a small vendor. He would have gone, that person would have gone and undercut to get the L1. L1 is the worst thing the government can do. And they will go and with some 5 lakh or 10 lakh, they would bid for it. Obviously, they can't meet. So they are hoping that some change request, something they can keep getting and getting more money. They would not have gotten paid on time because nothing can be paid on time. Obviously, that side is not going to work. Okay, it's not you to blame. So I think you have to create, government should build extremely minimal system. I think Sanjay is wanting to say something. Why don't you step in?
Yeah, so actually what I was saying was that the key is that there are lots of people in government who want to do things. I mean, the people who want to deliver services, not everybody is corrupt, not everybody has the intention of not wanting to deliver. And this actually allows them to do that. So if you basically are within a transport department, you don't need a smart city. You need one transport commissioner to say, you know what, I'm going to make my transport department with an open API. You actually think much smaller. And India Stack provides certain elements of identity, payment, etc., which can help. But the biggest thing is this. You have an open data, you put up an API, you start to build a minimal system, and you allow others to provide services. And then that will start to multiply. You have one transport guy doing something, one power, one water, one property tax collector across the country doing it. And open sourcing it, pretty much you will get smart cities bottom up across the country.
Great point. So actually, let me switch to now a second part, so that I think the big issue is always led with examples. So, the OpenStack has been used for, I think the most popularly known one is the LPG subsidy. There's the NRE GS. Some governments have used it for attendance systems. And then you have now thoughts of using it for public distribution with ration cards and outlets out there. So let me get into some areas where I like to bounce your thoughts. For example, voting. We all have, everybody has issues of voter identity. You're registered, but you're not there. Your identity is not there, or you're not there at the vote, so you can't vote. So the fundamental right of an Indian citizen is to vote. So how can India Stack actually help them?
So this touches the identity layer. And logically, it should be a very simple job for you to show up at a particular booth, prove your identity, prove that you're a resident of that particular polling district, and be able to vote. And that's, it should be as simple as that. It shouldn't be more complicated. If you don't have an Aadhaar, it's not yet mandatory, then you use some other form of identity that is acceptable to do that. And you use the ink anyway to prevent double voting, and that should really be the end of the story. Now it will take a very informed election commission to do this, and in fact I believe there are attempts to do that, and I'm hoping that with the passing of the bill they will revive and we will get there. I'm actually very hopeful it will happen.
Last year, actually, there was a conference. I presented in the conference last year. Election Commission, the team was there. CDAC was there. They had talked about, many external folks were there from outside the country. Basically a digital voting, where do we go towards that, and so on. So it's a very interesting discussion. Sanjay is absolutely right. It's actually quite simple. But Aadhaar is only a starting point. It only biometrically verifies that you are who you claim to be. It does not entitle you to your citizenship. It has no entitlement attached to it. So the election commission wanting to do election through digital, I mean, anywhere, sitting anywhere you want to vote, the first thing they should do is to create a minimalistic sort of layer on top of Aadhaar, which allows the Aadhaar-linked voting registry to be built. And also, when you do it, if you're going toward digital voting, anonymity is very, very key. So you want to be able to authenticate outside on a system, but vote on the machine, which is giving you that anonymity. So if it is just about attendance, it's pretty easy to bring. Sanjay is absolutely right. Very, very easy to bring that. And it actually now they can provide anywhere in your constituency. You don't have to go to the ward. They can actually say outside the constituency it may be still hard to get started, but at least in your constituency.
The whole idea of presence-less, can that extend it to I am traveling in the US and can I vote still? There are a lot of people who are not.
I think it's technically possible. It's a real question. Is take one step at a time. Voting is very, very critical. You can't fail. So I think they are thinking about first offering remote voting or those kind of things for military and Air Force and our security personnel, for example, who are not able to come to the ward where they live, and they have the right to vote. So I think they will look at stepwise approach. I think it is quite a change from many years of processes. So I know.
But definitely, I have a thought on this. We can start with something which is not as critical as a major national election. We will take an example of a share, a company annual meeting, and allow shareholders to vote from wherever they are, and see how that works as an experiment. It's not as critical as a political thing, but it's important nonetheless, and it can prove the idea. And I would hope startups can take that and start to find ways to take these ideas and experiment with them in other contexts.
Great. So let me jump to healthcare. When you go into a hospital today, health records is one aspect of it, insurance is another, billing is another, lots of things that are in multiple silos. With the India stack, again, giving the ability for digital lockers, consent layer, financial transactions, again, an area potentially to be, revolutionized for a lot of people, even at the bottom of the pyramid, more specifically.
I think it's true, and I think private guys are already, they will see. I think there is a adoption curve. I think recently one of them, and then stock, I think you talked about the initial curve is typically government programs. So if you look at Aadhaar adoption, it comes in the government first, PDS and other things, because the exchequer is spending a lot of money on subsidies than they want to control. The second one is the regulated markets that are typically friendly for digital, like fintech. They are very digitally savvy, they are ahead of the curve. And the third one is private adoption, where hotel check-ins, hospital purposes, appointment fixing, building entries, every one of them can be reimagined because there is an identity, there is a very strong assertion of that identity, and you can actually layer many services on top of that. You can even pay online. So I think many of that will come. But from a smart city perspective, I would urge the government, if they are looking at healthcare in that area, if you're looking at, for example, social security or healthcare insurance. Today that national insurance Prime Minister's program is very, very attractive. It's a small amount, but to pay the small amount, you have to go far away. So it's not, it's the execution of that idea is still limited to the traditional thinking. Is that you fill up a form, carry around a receipt because you know you're paid for it, all that thing, you know. So I think we would urge saying that with 1 billion people on Aadhaar and having 1 billion people having the ability to digitally sign papers, and you can actually build a small system, healthcare, for example, RSBY. If they are reimagining RSBY, it's a great opportunity in the healthcare to say, I will offer digital insurance verification platform, and all you have to do is walk into any of the nearby shop, authenticate yourself, pay the money, you subscribe, and your family is covered, and it's online, no forms to fill, and when you walk into the hospital, authenticate, they have an API to call to check if you are covered under the insurance. Today, the claim processing is a mess. No hospital wants to claim RSBY. Because money doesn't come, paperwork after paperwork. So I think it's possible to reimagine, and you know it's only 5.5 years or 6 years, so we can't be in a hurry. We should let that time be taken, and it takes one leader at a time. Sanjay's point that one commissioner, one lead. There are many brilliant guys in the government. One thing we walked out from government experiences, brilliant guys, a lot of motivation inside. But you know what? You know, traditional thinking stays because that's what they're used to doing it. So they continue to do.
Great. Another big area for potential innovation from startups. Sanjay, verification. You know, taxi drivers, maids, security personnel, employees, lots of things. Background verification, police verification, passports, this, that, etc. Verification of people is one huge challenge with a lot of paperwork, lots of people having to go and do things. That also is potentially ripe for innovation.
Yeah, so Ranga, that area is something which a lot of companies are working in. There are lots of startups that are out there who are actually trying to build these systems, and they are working with private players to do verification for them. But the key comes down to where the back-end systems don't have APIs. And again, from the smart city perspective, that's something we should be looking at, is to say, how do we make sure that, so for example, today you have to do police verification. You actually have to go to that particular thana where the person's address belongs to, and they have to actually look through a paper register to make sure that there's any complaint or not against this person. And then if there's a previous address which is in a different place, then a file moves across the country to that other police station to do that. And this is actually ripe for a digitization project in the police departments, which would then allow an API for these checks to be done. And that's something which would, you know, so you digitize just one department, and then you can make this entire process easier. The same is true with court systems, by the way. There are systems that digitize court records where the entire court judgment is transcribed and made available digitally, and it's searchable. And yet it's not available centrally. You have to go to each court jurisdiction to do that. So I think from a smart cities perspective, driving digitization in these departments individually, which makes it searchable, would make life easier for a whole lot of people who depend on them, without the court itself doing some significant amount of work.
So this actually is span across the city, across a state, across states, across the nation, and potentially even international. So you know, there's a need therefore for this kind of opening up network, so that you don't have to physically go and do that verification, whether it be for an accident, whether it be for people verification, whether it be for court cases, all those kind of things.
And I think another area you touched upon is that they're sort of related, is the sort of skilling. And government, central government onwards, you know, the intent is right. Intent is to, you know, create skilled workforce, because large young country, large number of people are coming out of that 20, 25 years old age. But again, when we go execution, we have to ask, it's not about setting up one large project where and centrally everything will be stored and on that thing. It's just the ability for people to be able to carry their certificates digitally signed, where an Aadhaar attached certificate. That means your certificate cannot be misused by someone else, and you cannot create fake certificates either. So that way, identity, a digital signature that is now pervasively available to be able to use it under the India stack should be used actually to allow individuals to carry their good credit rating or good experience with them and ability to portability. When I move from Delhi to some place, I should be able to carry, say, I am a good driver. I have 15 years of great driving experience. Here, my experience, and I want to be able to start from scratch. That's a terrible thing to ask for, and people today have no mechanism to carry their experience, even including, I mean, everybody has fake certificates and so on, so nobody even trusts them. So I think it's a perfect area where you can disrupt through India Stack. Not only verification, but skill portability, registration, certification, that part.
So with other identity is more for individuals, but when you start coming into land records, vehicles, all those kind of things, can we extend that identity across into other forms of assets, whether they be things like land and vehicles and so on and so forth, and take the same principles that have been applied to unique identity of a person to now unique identity of a car? Because today a number plate is the only form, and you switch a number plate, you have no clue. You land records, you can go through 6 different stations and potentially do have those records and things like that. So how do you make buying, selling, renting of all these assets, whether they be, we have handled the mutual fund by dematting this. Can we demat land, vehicle, and all the other assets and make transactions that much easier?
Yeah.
Insurance that much easier.
I think the identity of 4 things that we talk about. It's a sovereign function, and the government must do that basic identity of people, identity of companies or entities, identity of things that need to be registered. Now, you don't need to register your fridge and microwave, but you have to register your car, for example. And so those things that need to be registered, that registry has to be a sort of sovereign identity issuance to that thing. Then the 4th one is land. So your people, your land, your companies / entities, and your things. The 4 things that, and we have covered people, we have covered entities. I think the PMO has also taken a stance that PAN card, PAN identity, PAN as an identity, and GST, and of course have an extended identity for proprietorship. Will sort of continue because that's pervasively used for everything. With GSTN coming in, it will become more digitally available, and they have already started exposing APIs for it and so on. So that will happen. Entity identity will happen. Cars, interestingly, there are some moves about the RTO, for example, NIC's National Registry of Vehicles. That's actually gone online, but it is sort of a generation 2 application. It's still a portal plus some database rather than an API, but I think we could push them to go towards API for cars and so on. And land is untouched. There's a lot of talk about it, but I think it's not yet done. I mean,
so the equivalent of Dun & Bradstreet, which is the US equivalent for organization, is now becoming a reality in India. Is that what you're saying?
Actually, Ranga, the fact is that for legal persons, persons and legal persons, an identity system does exist because they pay taxes, they are part of digital systems. There are identities, it's just that we didn't have a single identity. What we had was very much a distributed form where there's an ID associated either with the tax guy or with the directors and so on. And that is, I think, there's an acceptance that we would move to a single system. But for things where, for example, vehicles, I actually do want to disagree with Pramod a little because it ends up being a state subject. Transport ministry, well, there's a central ministry, transport is organized state-wise, and every state has a different system. And hence, while NIC has put together a system which they provide to the states, it's still not a single system that does that.
Correct.
Also, identity of a vehicle is not its number plate, as you mentioned. That does change. And so I think they haven't gone that deep into it. And I hope they do, because vehicles do have other forms of identity like a VIN number, etc., which does not change. And they have not gone to make that visible and acceptable in a way that other identities are. But land is, I think, the biggest worry, because there's no move afoot to do that, and that's actually the amount of money that is locked in land, which cannot be sold, leased, rented easily, or even mortgaged easily, is really, really large. If we unlock that, that actually will straight away increase the GDP a few percentage points. It is that big. And we need to think through how that can be done. While GPS can be used to at least identify a land somehow, but still there are many issues, there are many owners of those records, whether it is the state or the municipal corporation or the village, and it's not well organized, and that's, I think, the biggest problem. But if we have the political will, I think we can make it happen.
Actually, some states have started land titling and so on. So they are actually starting to think about it. Karnataka, of course, has digital land records, but not titling. So possible. Maybe they'll come around. I mean, they don't have a choice. I think you'll eventually have to get it done. And, you know, designing like India Stack with an identity attached to it and an API attached for many people to verify would allow many startups, many companies to say, I'll give you a workflow to buy apartment or buy a villa, but we'll verify online. Everything will be digitally done for you, right? Today you can't do it because it's simply there's no single minimal system that allows that single identity and some sort of experience or usage attached to it or ownership attached.
Pramod, it's actually very interesting that land records, registry departments by law are actually public records. When you go out and register a property, technically it is a public record. So the information is completely available. It's just that there's no way to index it so that I can find out who had this property before me.
And maybe we need some sort of blockchain. I mean, one time titling has to be done. But after that, I think we can actually something which Sanjay and then some of us have started thinking of using, for example, blockchain as a technology to.
Because one of the biggest issues is,
distributed fashion. Interesting.
Even BDA approved properties, people come and claim, hey, it's mine, and so on and so forth. So, the big issue is trust. How can you trust a government, or how can you trust a party whether they are actually owning it or not? And as part of the land, there is this. I think real estate bill. Hopefully, if they had thought about it. As and when new property comes up, they should automatically associate it into a central record as well. So even maybe retrospect, there's a lot of land records around, but at least going forward, potentially, I think that is an easier problem to solve when you go for a new property registration and so on and so forth. So I think there are lots of examples.
One time, I think governments have to take a stab at it until that gets done. I think I heard Rajasthan or a couple of other states are also going aggressively on creating titling the land and creating a digital database. So there's some states ahead of the curve, at least in their thinking. That would set the tone, and then the rest of the guys will follow.
So there are lots of areas. I don't think we have time to do it, but just as a wrap up, since we have just about 5-6 minutes to go, any thoughts in terms of? I think government should focus probably on a hackathon equivalent of saying, look, these are the problems that we have. Here are our records. Here's India's stack. Can you guys innovate and solve problems for us? Because we would love it to be solved, but we don't necessarily have the internal capacity to do it. So maybe these expressions of interest can actually be, ideated through some of these kind of vehicles where there's a lot of, instead of spending a lot of money in terms of going to consultants and saying, can you study it, and paying hundreds of crores across multiple cities to actually do that, maybe each one of these governments should actually potentially run these kind of hackathons and crowdsource problems and crowdsource answers and solutions as a result of that. Because I think there's no doubt about the internal capacity of us to solve problems. It's a question of, unlocking the potential of all of us, be it startups, be it large companies or NGOs or citizens or RWAs, how we all have our thoughts, our ideas. So multidisciplinary approach to solving these problems, I think, where a mix of technology as well as other non-technology elements come together to solve cities' problems, I think would be the way to go. Any thoughts and suggestions?
So Ranga, I think that's a great idea. In fact, there are some governments doing it. I've seen over the past year a few hackathons in this space, and in fact, as iSpirit, we are in discussions with one of the state governments to do a hackathon on e-governance, and hopefully we'll have that come up soon. And essentially, there again, we're suggesting exactly what you said, is to say, let's convince them to figure out what APIs they can open up and have people actually build a solution against that API. Because seeing is believing. And that's really, I think, our biggest challenge. So beyond the ideation phase, it is to see if they can open up some APIs and then against those APIs have those ideas being implemented. And hopefully we'll start to see some results on that front soon.
And I agree. I think the ideation is a great way to collaborate. But you know what? At least other experience taught us that you have to be in the trenches and you have to do many, many hours of brainstorming, writing down documentation, putting it on green file, getting approval. If you don't have the patience for it or energy for it, you will not be able to do it. So ideation is a great starting point. We can't avoid consultants. Consultants are required because formality is required, public money being spent, so the documents have to be written down. Then also some core team to really think through the minimal design constructs before they can actually put out. And iSpirit has been helping some national projects. So iSpirit is GSTN, for example, GST design. iSpirit was very actively designing before even they put out the RFP. So we designed the entire platform under APIs before they put out RFP. Bharat Bill Pay is the same thing, or UPI. Sanjay and I have been working 2 years, with Nandan's leadership there within PCI to get that API done. So there's a lot of hard work, and iSpirit, for example, takes up a lot of this. But we would encourage many volunteer smart guys to step in and spend a year. You will learn a lot of good fun, good learning, and because sitting outside on on a hangout and discussing is much easier, but doing it is really hard.
So maybe this is a call to action for anybody who's got interest in making our cities that much smarter, livable. You heard some fascinating thoughts and ideas from Sanjay and Pramod. So with that, maybe we should end this particular OEQ. Hopefully you have triggered enough thoughts and ideas to maybe many entrepreneurs to come and maybe answer these issues. And hopefully some ministers and politicians and bureaucrats would also listen to this to open up some of their minds in terms of different approaches from what they're currently addressing. So thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ranga.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you. Bye-bye.